Let's be real for a moment. Life doesn't hit us the hardest because of what happens to us. It hits us hardest because of what we keep tolerating. The truth most people avoid is this: every door that stays open to disrespect, laziness, excuses, and fear is a door we chose not to close. You can talk about pain all day, but if you keep allowing the same patterns, the pain becomes a decision. This isn't about blame, it's about power. Because the moment you understand that you allow more than you realize, you also understand that you can change more than you ever believed. Tolerance is rarely a loud decision. Most of the time it happens quietly, in small moments when you choose not to react, not to speak, not to walk away. In those moments, you may think you are being patient, understanding, or avoiding conflict, but what you are really doing is communicating approval through silence. Human behavior responds more to patterns than to words. When something happens once and you address it, it can be a mistake. When it happens repeatedly and you say nothing, it becomes a rule. That is why tolerance is a silent agreement. It tells the world, and more importantly tells your own mind, that this treatment, this habit, or this situation is acceptable. People often believe respect is something others give, but respect is first something you enforce. If someone crosses your boundaries and nothing happens, the boundary no longer exists. The same applies to your own behavior. When you tolerate your own excuses, procrastination, or lack of discipline, you are training yourself to believe that your goals are optional. Over time, this agreement becomes so normal that you forget you ever had a higher standard. What once felt wrong starts to feel familiar, and familiarity can be dangerously comfortable. Silence is often mistaken for peace, but real peace does not require you to abandon yourself. There is a big difference between choosing calm and choosing fear. Many people stay quiet because they are afraid of losing relationships, opportunities, or approval. But every time you protect external comfort at the cost of internal respect, you lose something more valuable. You lose trust in yourself. And once you stop trusting yourself to stand up for your own standards, confidence slowly erodes. You may not notice it immediately, but it shows up in hesitation, self-doubt, and resentment. What you tolerate today sets the tone for tomorrow. Disrespect that is ignored today returns stronger tomorrow. Mediocrity that is accepted today becomes a lifestyle tomorrow. Life expands or contracts based on what you allow to stay. This is not about being aggressive or confrontational. It's about being clear. Clarity is powerful. When your actions consistently reflect your standards, people adjust automatically. And if they don't, their absence creates space for something better. Tolerance also shapes identity. When you repeatedly allow things that go against who you want to become, your actions and your vision fall out of alignment. That inner conflict creates frustration. You may feel stuck, drained, or unmotivated without knowing why. The reason is simple. Your environment and habits are pulling you in one direction, while your potential is calling you in another. Until you stop agreeing with what holds you back, growth will always feel like a struggle. It is important to understand that setting limits does not make you difficult, cold, or selfish. It makes you honest. People who benefit from your silence may resist when you finally speak up, but that resistance is proof that your silence was costing you more than you realize. Growth often begins with discomfort, because you are breaking an unspoken agreement that no longer serves you. The moment you change what you tolerate, you change the conversation without saying much at all. Your energy shifts, your posture shifts, your decisions become firmer. Life starts responding differently, not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped signing contracts that kept you small. A simple example makes this clear. Imagine someone at work constantly interrupting you in meetings and taking credit for your ideas. At first, you let it slide, telling yourself it's not worth attention. The interruptions continue. The credit taking becomes routine, and soon others stop hearing your voice altogether. One day, you calmly but firmly speak up, restating your point and setting the record straight. The behavior changes immediately, not because the person suddenly grew morals, but because the silent agreement ended. The moment you stopped tolerating it, the pattern lost its power. This is the truth. You don't always get what you deserve, but you almost always get what you allow. When you raise your standards through action, not words, life has no choice but to rise with you. Complaining can feel like movement, but most of the time it is only noise. It gives the illusion that you are addressing a problem when, in reality, you are simply describing it. This is why complaints without action become a form of self-betrayal. When you complain but refuse to change anything, you are acknowledging that something is wrong while choosing to remain loyal to it. That internal contradiction slowly weakens your confidence and self-respect, because deep down you know you are capable of more than you are demonstrating. The danger of constant complaining is that it turns pain into comfort. Speaking about frustration releases emotional pressure, so the mind feels temporary relief. That relief tricks you into believing progress has been made, but nothing has actually changed. The situation remains the same, the habits remain the same, and the results remain the same. Over time, complaining becomes a routine, not a signal for action. Instead of being a warning system that pushes you to grow, it becomes a hiding place where you avoid responsibility. When you repeatedly say you hate where you are but continue doing what keeps you there, you are sending yourself a message that your words mean more than your actions, and your mind learns to trust actions, not intentions. This is how people lose belief in themselves. They promise change, complain about circumstances, but protect the very behaviors that created those circumstances. Eventually, motivation fades, not because they lack potential, but because they no longer believe their own words. Complaints also quietly reinforce a victim mindset. When you talk about problems without acting on them, you shift focus away from what you can control and place it on what you can't. This may feel comforting because it removes pressure, but it also removes power. Growth only happens when you accept that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you are always responsible for what you do next. Action, even imperfect action, restores that power. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging frustration. The problem begins when frustration stops there. Complaining should be a starting point, not a lifestyle. It should highlight what needs to change, not replace the effort required to change it. If you are still in the same place, months or years after voicing the same complaints, the issue is no longer the situation. The issue is the decision to stay familiar with discomfort instead of risking the uncertainty of growth. Fear is often the real reason behind inaction. Change demands effort, discipline, and the possibility of failure. Complaining allows you to avoid all three while still feeling justified. But avoiding action does not eliminate consequences. It delays them. The cost of staying the same is often far greater than the cost of trying and failing. Regret is heavier than effort, and excuses eventually expire. The moment discomfort becomes stronger than fear, everything shifts. Action does not require confidence. First, confidence is built by acting despite uncertainty. Even small steps break the cycle of self-betrayal. When you align your actions with your words, you rebuild trust with yourself. That trust fuels momentum, and momentum creates results. This is how people transform, not through perfect plans, but through decisive movement.
A short example makes this clear. Imagine someone who constantly complains about being broke.
They talk about low pay, unfair opportunities, and lack of luck. Yet they refuse to learn a new skill, budget their money, or sacrifice time for growth. Months pass, nothing changes, and frustration deepens. One day, instead of complaining, they take one uncomfortable step, waking up earlier to learn a skill after work. That single action doesn't make them rich overnight, but it ends the self-betrayal. From that moment, their words and actions align and progress finally begins. Complaints without action keep you stuck. Action, even when imperfect, sets you free. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls, but in reality, they are lines of clarity. They are not built to keep people out. They are built to keep you intact. When you fail to set boundaries, you are not being kind or flexible. You are slowly teaching others that your limits are negotiable. Over time, this creates a pattern where your time, energy, and emotional space are treated as resources anyone can access without permission. The most damaging part is not how others behave, but what you begin to believe about yourself when you allow it to continue. Every relationship, whether personal or professional, operates on unspoken rules. If you do not define those rules, others will define them for you, usually in ways that benefit them. When you say yes to everything, tolerate disrespect, or ignore your own exhaustion, you communicate that your needs come last. People don't need to be cruel to cross your boundaries. They simply follow the standard you set through your behavior. What you allow once becomes expected, and what is expected becomes repeated. Boundaries are proof of self-respect because they require honesty and courage. They force you to acknowledge what drains you, what hurts you, and what distracts you from your purpose. Saying no can feel uncomfortable, especially if you are used to being agreeable or available. But discomfort is often the price of growth. Without boundaries, resentment builds quietly. You may smile on the outside while feeling used, undervalued, or invisible on the inside. That internal conflict slowly erodes confidence and clarity. Setting boundaries also reshapes your relationship with yourself. When you protect your time and energy, you send yourself a powerful message: I matter. That message strengthens self-trust. You begin to believe your goals deserve space, your rest deserves protection, and your peace is not optional. This inner alignment creates confidence that does not depend on validation. You stop explaining yourself excessively, stop seeking permission to prioritize your life, and stop feeling guilty for choosing what supports your growth. Not everyone will like your boundaries, and that is often what stops people from setting them. But approval is a poor substitute for respect. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may push back, test you, or label you as changed. That resistance is not a sign you are wrong. It is proof that your boundaries are working. Respect does not always come with applause. Sometimes it comes quietly through changed behavior or increased distance. Both are acceptable outcomes if they protect your well-being. Boundaries also create better relationships, not fewer ones. When expectations are clear, resentment has less room to grow. Healthy people respect limits because they understand limit. TS preserve connection. Unhealthy dynamics thrive on confusion and overextension. By setting boundaries, you filter your environment. You make space for people and opportunities that align with your values and remove constant friction from your life. Self-respect is not loud. It is consistent. It shows up in how you answer messages, how you manage your schedule, how you respond to disrespect, and how quickly you walk away from what drains you. Boundaries are not about control, they are about choice. They give you the ability to choose where your energy goes instead of letting it be taken by default. A short example illustrates this clearly. Imagine someone who is always available for friends, answering calls late at night, canceling personal plans, and solving everyone else's problems. Over time, they feel exhausted and unappreciated, yet the calls never stop. One day, they decide to stop answering late-night calls and communicate that they need rest. At first, a few friends are annoyed, but soon the calls decrease, respect increases, and the person feels lighter and more focused. Nothing about their kindness changed, only their boundaries did. Boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who is willing to meet you with respect and who is only comfortable when you had none. Discipline is often misunderstood as punishment, restriction, or a lack of freedom, but in truth, it is the highest form of self-respect. It is the conscious decision to face difficulty now so that life does not force greater difficulty on you later. Every day presents a choice between two types of pain, the pain of effort or the pain of regret. Laziness feels light in the moment because it asks nothing from you immediately, but it quietly compounds into stress, insecurity, and missed potential. Discipline, on the other hand, feels heavy at first because it demands consistency, sacrifice, and discomfort, yet it gradually buys you freedom, confidence, and peace. Allowing excuses is seductive because they sound reasonable. You're tired, the timing isn't right, motivation is low, circumstances aren't perfect. None of these are lies, but they become traps when they are used repeatedly. Excuses delay action, and delayed action delays growth. Over time, what started as a temporary pause turns into a permanent pattern. The cost doesn't appear right away, which is why it's easy to ignore, but eventually that cost shows up as stagnation, self-doubt, and the painful realization that time moved forward while you stayed the same. Discipline is choosing to struggle on purpose. That phrase matters. It means you willingly step into discomfort rather than waiting for life to push you into it. When you wake up early to work on yourself, when you train your body while it aches, when you stay focused while distractions pull at you, you are selecting controlled difficulty. This kind of struggle strengthens you. It builds mental toughness and self-trust. You begin to believe in yourself because you keep promises to yourself even when no one is watching. Suffering by default is what happens when discipline is avoided. Bills pile up because spending was undisciplined. Health declines because habits were neglected. Opportunities disappear because preparation was postponed. This kind of suffering feels unfair, but it is often the delayed result of small choices made daily. Life becomes harder not because it is cruel, but because it responds honestly to what you consistently allow. The grind is rarely glamorous. There are no constant rewards, no applause for showing up every day, no instant transformation. That is why many people quit. They expect motivation to carry them, but motivation is unreliable. Discipline remains when motivation disappears. It is built in the quiet moments when quitting would be easier. Over time, these moments stack up. What once felt impossible becomes normal. What once felt heavy becomes routine. That is how strength is built. Regret, however, is heavier than effort. Effort asks for energy in the present. Regret demands payment in the future, often with interest. Regret sounds like I should have started earlier. I wasted too much time. I knew better but didn't act. These thoughts carry emotional weight that no amount of comfort can erase. Discipline protects you from that weight. It may not make life easy, but it makes life honest. Daily habits are the real architects of your future. Big dreams mean nothing without small, disciplined actions repeated consistently. What you allow yourself to skip today becomes easier to skip tomorrow. What you force yourself to face today becomes easier to face next time. Life doesn't change overnight, but it always changes eventually, in the direction of your habits. Discipline is simply choosing that direction intentionally instead of letting it happen accidentally. A short example makes this clear. Imagine two people with the same goal of improving their health. One chooses the hard now, waking up early, exercising when tired, eating with intention. It feels uncomfortable, slow, and unrewarding at first. The other chooses the easy now, skipping workouts, eating for comfort, promising to start later. Months pass. The disciplined person feels stronger, more confident, and energized. The other feels heavier, frustrated, and disappointed. Both experienced difficulty, but only one chose it on purpose. The difference wasn't talent or luck, it was discipline. Discipline doesn't steal your freedom, it creates it. Responsibility is often framed as a burden, something heavy that people want to escape. Many grow up believing that taking responsibility means carrying guilt, pressure, or blame for everything that goes wrong. Because of that belief, they look for excuses, explanations, or someone else to point at when life doesn't turn out the way they hoped. But true responsibility is not about punishment. It is about power. The moment you stop blaming people, luck, Tim, Ing, or circumstances, you reclaim control over your life. And control is freedom. Blame feels comforting because it removes pressure. If something is someone else's fault, then you don't have to change. But comfort comes at a cost. When you give blame to others, you also give them power over your future. You hand over the steering wheel of your life and tell yourself that progress depends on things outside your control. That mindset creates stagnation. You may feel justified, but you also feel stuck. Responsibility, on the other hand, may feel uncomfortable at first, but it instantly puts you back in the driver's seat. Taking responsibility does not mean denying reality. It does not mean pretending that obstacles, unfairness, or hardship don't exist. It means accepting that no matter what happens, you still control your response. You control your effort, your attitude, your decisions, and your next move. This shift in perspective is liberating. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You begin asking, what can I do about this now? That question alone changes everything. Many people confuse responsibility with self-criticism. They think owning their mistakes means tearing themselves down. In truth, responsibility is rooted in self-respect. It says, I am capable of learning, adjusting, and improving. Beating yourself up keeps you trapped in the past. Responsibility pulls you forward. It focuses on solutions instead of shame. When you own your choices without judge, meant you grow stronger instead of smaller. Owning your outcomes also builds confidence. Confidence does not come from always winning. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes next. When you accept responsibility, you stop feeling helpless. Even when results are disappointing, you know they are not the end of your story. They are feedback. That mindset transforms failure from an identity into a lesson. Instead of thinking this proves I'm not good enough, you think this shows me what to do differently. That shift is the foundation of resilience. Responsibility also removes fear of other people's opinions. When you own your direction, external validation loses its grip. You stop living reactively, constantly adjusting your choices to please or impress others. You become internally guided. Your standards matter more than applause. This independence is real freedom. No one can manipulate you with guilt or approval when you are rooted in ownership. Life becomes simpler when responsibility is embraced. Not easier, but clearer. You waste less energy on excuses and more energy on progress. You stop replaying stories about what should have happened and start building what can happen next. Every decision becomes intentional. Even setbacks feel purposeful because they teach you something about yourself and your process. When you own your choices, you also own your future. No one else gets to decide how far you go, how hard you try, or how much you grow. Circumstances may influence your starting point, but responsibility determines your direction, and direction matters more than speed. Slow progress with full ownership is far more powerful than fast movement fueled by excuses. A short example illustrates this clearly. Imagine two people who lose their jobs at the same time. One spends months blaming the company, the economy, and unfair management. They talk about how unlucky they are and wait for conditions to improve. The other acknowledges the disappointment but takes responsibility for what comes next. They update their skills, adjust their approach, and actively seek new opportunities. Months later, one is still stuck in frustration while the other has moved forward. The difference wasn't luck or talent, it was responsibility. Responsibility does not trap you, it frees you. Because once you own your life, no one else controls where it goes. Growth rarely feels exciting at the beginning because it demands something most people are afraid to give up: familiarity. Humans don't just cling to comfort, they cling to familiar pain. There are situations that hurt, drain, and limit us, yet we stay loyal to them because we know them well. A bad relationship, an unfulfilling job, a toxic routine, or a limiting belief can feel safer than the unknown. Not because they are good, but because they are predictable. Familiar pain offers certainty, and certainty feels like security, even when it slowly destroys potential. The mind is wired to prioritize survival over growth. It would rather choose what is known than risk what is uncertain. This is why people stay in environments that stunt them. The pain becomes manageable because it's expected. You know what to expect, how to cope, how to complain, and how to survive. Growth, on the other hand, introduces uncertainty. It demands new behavior, new standards, and the possibility of failure. That uncertainty triggers fear, and fear convinces you that staying small is safer than trying to become more comfort zone. It's are dangerous, not because they are painful, but because they are convincing. They whisper lies like this isn't that bad. Others have it worse, or at least you know what you're dealing with. Over time, these thoughts normalize dissatisfaction. You stop dreaming big because dreaming makes your current reality feel unbearable. So instead, you adjust your expectations to match your environment. That adjustment feels like peace, but it is actually surrender.
Familiar pain also shapes identity.
When you've lived with something long enough, it starts to feel like part of who you are. You may identify as the person who is always overlooked, always struggling, always stuck, or always settling. Letting go of that pain feels like losing a part of yourself. Growth then becomes not just a change in circumstances, but a change in identity. And identity shifts are uncomfortable. They force you to face questions like, who am I without this struggle? And what if I fail without an excuse? Letting go of comfort does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you trade predictable suffering for purposeful discomfort. Growth comes with its own pain, discipline, uncertainty, loneliness, and effort. But this pain builds you instead of shrinking you. It stretches your capacity instead of draining it. The difference is direction. Familiar pain keeps you in the same place. Growth pain moves you forward. Many people wait for confidence before they leave their comfort zone, but confidence is a result, not a requirement. It is built by surviving the unknown and realizing you are capable. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you send yourself a powerful message: I can handle more than I thought. That message compounds. Slowly, fear loses its authority, and your tolerance for mediocrity disappears. Letting go also requires honesty. You must admit that some things you call comfortable are actually cages. They protect you from risk, but they also block opportunity. They keep you from rejection, but they also keep you from fulfillment. Growth begins the moment you tell the truth about what is costing you your potential, even if that truth hurts. The hardest part of growth is the transition phase. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. This phase feels unstable and lonely. Old patterns no longer fit, but new ones haven't fully formed. Many people quit here and run back to familiar pain because at least it feels solid. But if you can stay through the discomfort, clarity eventually replaces confusion, strength replaces fear, and what once felt terrifying becomes normal. A short example makes this clear. Imagine someone who stays in a relationship where they feel ignored and undervalued. It hurts, but it's familiar. They know the patterns, the arguments, the disappointments. Leaving means being alone, facing uncertainty, and rebuilding self-worth. That feels scarier than staying. But the moment they leave, the loneliness they feared becomes space. Space to heal, grow, and rediscover themselves. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it changed direction. It started leading somewhere better. Growth always asks for a sacrifice, not of your happiness, but of what no longer deserves your loyalty. Familiar pain feels safe, but it keeps you small. Letting go feels scary, but it sets you free. Here's the truth that changes everything. Your life is not defined by what you want, but by what you allow. If you want respect, stop tolerating disrespect. If you want success, stop allowing excuses. If you want peace, stop giving access to chaos. The moment you raise your standards, life responds different. Lie, people adjust, opportunities appear, and your confidence grows. So before you complain, ask yourself this: what am I allowing that I need to end today? Because the moment you stop allowing what hurts you, you make room for what's meant for you. And that's where real power begins.